Well, one day after announcing its first tranche of major projects, the Liberal government is facing some mounting questions about Canada's oil and climate futures. Reuters is reporting that the Liberals are in discussions with Alberta and energy companies about possibly dropping the oil and gas emissions cap in a new climate plan set for later this fall. Reuters cites three unnamed sources saying the move would be contingent on Alberta and the oil sector making renewed serious commitments to emissions reductions. When asked today, the climate minister didn't confirm or deny that report, but the energy minister offered this about the discussions.
What we agree on is for the oil industry to make a fundamental change in the emissions intensity of the oil sands, a nation-building change. That's unity. That's unity we haven't seen in a long time.
Danielle Smith is the Premier of Alberta, and she joins me now. Premier Smith, it's good to see you again. Thank you for your time today.
Hi, David.
You were rather happy yesterday, it seemed, after your meetings with the Prime Minister. And then I saw a story from Reuters reporting that the Prime Minister is talking to Alberta about removing the emissions cap. Is that what is coming up in your conversations? Is that what the Prime Minister is putting on the table here?
Well, the Prime Minister knows that I've got a problem with 9 of his laws, and the emissions cap is one of the big problems that we have. I've told him we've got a bit of a chicken and egg problem, that you won't have proponents willing to step up and pledge barrels to a new pipeline if you have an emissions cap that makes them shut it in the ground, which is what the emissions cap would do with the way it's structured. And so I think he understands that. We have a bunch that we're working through, but we're finding a surprising amount of common ground. And so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that when we get to the Grey Cup announcement, I gather he's got a second tranche of major projects that he is going to announce by then, that we have a bitumen pipeline and the Pathways project on that list.
So the chicken and egg, is he willing to break some eggs to make an omelet, to continue that metaphor? Like, is he suggesting to you that there could be real flexibility, if not outright change, on some of these policies that you don't like?
What you have to remember, when I first got elected, I talked to his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, about how we were going to be developing our own emissions reduction and energy development plan that would orient our carbon neutrality objective to 2050, which is in keeping with some of the international agreements that we've signed. And I asked him to work with us on that. And so what I'm finding is that although Trudeau wasn't willing to work with us at all, and in fact kept on bringing in brand new policies that moved us further and further in the wrong direction, I believe that this Prime Minister understands that the world has changed, that we have to be in sync with our American partners, but we also have to have a time frame that is going to make sense as the global energy market has turned into such turmoil, and our major trading partners and allies need to have a reliable supply of energy. So you can't have both. You just have to have the right time horizon, because then investment in technology allows us to reach those targets. So we're having some very constructive conversations about being able to reorient around that timeline.
Okay, so is that the focus, like, for example, to come back to the emissions cap, because this is what Reuters pointed to, it's not so much necessarily getting rid of it as a policy instrument, it's moving the horizon back, aligning more with that mid-century target rather than 2030, 2035? Like, what sort of options are we looking at here?
I'll tell you what the oil sands are looking at, and this is part of the reason why I have every confidence that a 2050 target is achievable, is because they say it is. They have a 3-part plan. One would be having the Pathways project, which is capturing the CO2 at source, putting it in the ground and burying it, or using it for enhanced oil recovery. We've had decades of experience with that. That is not new technology; it's proven technology. That's one part. The second part is adopting nuclear. I know that we've already funded a program for Cenovus to look at how a small modular reactor might be able to assist them in some of those operations. I think Darlington is going to be opening up very, very soon, first in the world. So we're very keen on that. And then the third one is direct air capture, which is, we call that the last mile, is being able to capture CO2 and put it into either storage or useful products. And we've got some major investments that have happened in Alberta in that regard. So that's one pathway. We also know that on the electricity pathway, pathway. We have many companies here. Capital Power was one who had a target of 2045, very similar, because they think that carbon capture, as well as a large nuclear and other types of installations, will get us there by 2050. So that's what I'm looking at, is let's see how we can achieve the objective, but do it without punishing the industry that is going to be able to generate the capital to make those investments. And I think that the Prime Minister is seeing our perspective.
But other than seeing your perspective, and I guess the tone is a bit different, but what tangibly is changing with how you think the federal government is going to approach the climate issues and regulation on emissions that gives you such optimism that we saw on display this week? Like, what specifically is it that makes you feel this way?
Well, number one, as soon as he got elected, he eliminated the retail carbon tax. Number two, he's pushed off as he does an analysis on whether the net zero vehicles is practical to implement. I think he's going to find it's not. And so we're seeing that he's already making some modifications of some of those Trudeau era policies as he's run it through a lens of, is this achievable? And I've been very clear, any kind of targets to 2030 are not achievable. That's only 5 years from now. You cannot do the things that I just talked about in 5 years. You can't even do them in 10 years. Could you do them in 25? Maybe. I have great hope that the industry is going to be able to implement those kinds of technologies. They seem to have confidence. You just got to give time for technology to be able to be developed to the level that the politicians are aspiring to. You can't just put a policy in place with no plan on how to achieve it, because then the only way to achieve it is to shut in production or shut down the development of new energy, and that doesn't make sense for any of us. So I like the pragmatism that I'm seeing. We still have a little bit more work to do on a few of those 9 policies I've put on the table, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And ultimately, if we can get more bitumen pipelines built, more of our product to market, then it solves a lot of the budget problems that we have at the provincial level, and a lot of the budget problems that the Prime Minister has at the federal level.
Well, I'm sure you've seen and heard the concerns of people who were very in support of the climate agenda of the previous government and are looking with some alarm and trepidation as bits of it are either thrown away, paused, or reconsidered. Are you willing to do things on the Alberta side with the industrial policy, for example, industrial pricing policies and emission reductions on a provincial level, to help offset some of what the federal government might do to help advance the emissions reduction while you get some of the economic activity you're looking for?
Well, I've always been prepared to work towards a 2050 net neutrality target. I have a whole report that I released in April of 2023 in that regard. What was missing was a federal willingness to partner with us on that time horizon. And so that's what we're working towards. I understand that in order for us to be able to get more bitumen to market, one of the arguments that we can make is that we've got a lower carbon barrel. And that's something that the Pathways Group identified as one of their advantages in being able to sell that to the Asian markets and to the European markets. And so I feel like we will be able to, with a long enough time horizon, work with industry to be able to achieve that with technology. The problem is if you put a target in too soon. Remember what was happening. What was happening under the net zero power regs is they were telling anyone who wanted to invest today in a natural gas plant that if they weren't 95% abated on CO2 by 2035, that the executives would go to jail. That is currently how the law is written.
Right.
That is the reason why that's the reason no one is putting forward a natural gas power plant proposal, is because that no board of directors and no CEO will take that risk.
Right. Well, we have talked about that before. I know there were criminal code violations in the legislation, but it had to do with like deliberate misleading and stuff, not if a best efforts failed. And anyway, I want to set that aside because of the time that we have. But like, I know that the laws, you say, are the big obstacle here on the pipelines. There still is the lack of a proponent. There still is the lack of obvious, clear support from British Columbia to get the Tidewater. So the bargain, as it was described yesterday and laid out by the Prime Minister, was that pathways could be tied to a pipeline. Do you see as like no pathways, no pipeline, no pipeline, no pathways? Do you see them as completely interconnected and dependent, that one only happens with the other?
I think they're interconnected for sure. I mean, when you think about the proposal that they're talking about, it's a pretty substantial project. They're talking about 10 to 20 billion dollars of investment. It's a whole lot easier to pay for that if you have a new revenue stream from a million barrel per day bitumen pipeline that's generating 20 billion dollars worth of revenue per year for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. So yes, I think it makes perfect sense that we would talk about those two things together. Our industry, I'm so proud of them. They are constantly looking at ways for improvement. This is an industry that took a barrel of oil and found out how to make 6,000 products out of it. They are going to find some way to make some useful purpose out of CO2. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And so this is not inconsistent for us to support the industry in all of that innovation so that we can achieve multiple objectives at the same time. Let's make sure that we get the revenue stream because we all need it. And then let's make sure that we're also investing in the innovation and technology.
So what about finding a proponent? Because that is the big question. Like, and I know you say the chicken, going back to the chicken and the egg. As long as the laws are there, there won't be a proponent. But you and the Prime Minister and Minister Hodgson are signaling that there is flexibility possible here. And there was the acknowledgement that a pipeline is possible with pathways. So what does this mean for your quest for a proponent and the likelihood of where things are? Because I know you said you've been working on this, offering like a supply of oil and to be an anchor tenant and all of these things. Are you any closer to having someone who actually raise their hand, step forward and say, we will build this thing?
We won't until I think the Prime Minister and I are standing at a podium together saying, you know what, we fixed the bad laws, we're committed to a pipeline, and we're also committed to supporting pathways. As soon as I think the Prime Minister and I are in agreement, I have every expectation that that is going to make a big difference to those who make investment decisions. But we're not there yet. We're a lot of the way there, but we're not 100% of the way there. So we've got a lot of work to do over the next few weeks. But I had a very encouraging meeting yesterday. I think you've seen some of the reporting. So my interpretation of that meeting seems to be consistent with the Prime Minister's, and we're just going to keep on going until we can get that agreement.
So is this the halftime show at the Grey Cup? Do you think you can have this done by the CFL Championship and have a proponent identified and ready to go, or could it take a little bit longer than that?
We'll wait and see. We're all working towards that. I think that the Prime Minister put that out as a target for a reason. He wants to get a sense of urgency. I can tell you my folks have the same sense of urgency that his does. And so I hope we've got a positive announcement before November 16th.
Okay. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, always appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.